everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Modern Farming Podcast. My name is Chris Weary. I'm your co-host for today. And here at the Modern Farming Podcast, we like to say we are bringing innovation to agriculture with education and outreach. Today, my co-host is Mr. Brad Turner. He's been around. He's back on the show for this exciting podcast with our guest. Good morning, Brad. How are you doing?
Hey, Chris. No, doing great. Looking forward to the conversation. This will be a good one. This will be a lot of fun.
I think so too, and we're really touching on a subject that is pretty important to the Green Gene Foundation, who is the sponsor of this podcast. One of the biggest emphasis that Green Genes puts on their work is soil conservation and regenerative type farming, and that's who our guest is today. Is Mr. Steve Suau, who is a hydrologist and a soil biologist, and very much into the soil health and the health of our waterways here in Florida. Good morning, Steve. How are you?
Good morning, guys. Good to be here.
Hey, Steve, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do over there with your different hats that you wear as a hydrologist and soil biologist.
Yeah, so I'm actually registered professional engineer, but trained in civil engineering. But my expertise is really an experience for the last 40 some years has been in water, all things water, really, I guess, in Southwest Florida, South Florida a bit. And I've always been interested in the nexus between water and soil. And so I've kind of migrated into more of soil biology understanding in recent years. But I've served in both the public and private sector, mainly in the private sector, and sold my consulting firm a couple years ago, and pretty much just freelance as a hydrologist and soil biologist, and on projects that I am interested in doing.
Very cool. Very cool. And you know Brad from his work for many years.
Yeah, I'm an admirer of Brad. We've met a couple times, but I admire what Brad's doing.
Yep, it's been a while, but it's good to see you again.
Yeah, you too.
Excellent. So I think maybe we want to start off with you've got a very interesting book, interesting to me and Brad anyway. It's called the Community Playbook for Healthy Waterways. Can you talk about how that book came about and why you feel it's so important to the Southwest Florida water conservation effort?
Yeah, it really came about as a result of the last red tide bloom we had in Southwest Florida in 2018-19. The book is actually was put together by the Gulf Coast Community Foundation here, and I was one of the authors of it. It allowed me to do a deep dive into some of the water issues, particularly around nutrient and nitrogen nitrogen and phosphorus management, since those are the pollutants that seem to be the fuel for these harmful algae blooms. I know over on the East Coast, it's blue-green algae. On the West Coast here, it's primarily red tide. And so I was able to really dive into the data, wastewater data that's used for irrigation in many cases, and learned, of course, that wastewater is not created equal. Some plants do a really good job of getting rid of nitrogen, reducing it, and some don't do such a good job. And so most of the nitrogen put out in reclaimed water is almost all in the form of nitrate. So it's like liquid fertilizer going out. And so if the concentrations are high, it can be more than the landscape or the crops need. And nitrate is instant food for algae, and it's soluble, so it can be a real issue. And fertilizer is another, of course, source of nutrients. On this coast, those are probably the main two. Anything related to our waste, whether it's from going into a treatment plant, a package plant, a septic, drain field, or biosolids for that matter, all can contain high levels of nutrients and need to be managed. So, and that's what really, I guess that was really where I really started to dive deep into, through that research that I did, into the opportunities that building soil can provide as alternative to the chemical approach. So it seems like and it's interesting because on this coast, and I'm sure it's the same on the East Coast, so much of agriculture has been converted to suburban landscapes.
Right.
And when you look at that and you realize how much water and nutrients are being applied, you're thinking, agriculture isn't the source of all this. It's all
Right.
this green space that's out there that's being over irrigated and fertilized. Just like agriculture, if you're using fertilizer and irrigation, that's the only way you're going to get the stuff to grow. So a lot of revelations on that, and the whole thing around trying to manage landscapes with biology instead of chemistry as a means to reduce nutrients and harmful algae blooms. And that was really the goal of the playbook, was to develop strategies that communities could implement in a meaningful way to reduce these harmful algae blooms. And one of the key outcomes of that was Sarasota County, which is where I'm at and where the Gulf Coast is, has committed to upgrade all their wastewater plants to be advanced wastewater treatment, which means they get the nutrients down. And that's a real significant development, because it's a real significant cost to do that. But they'll complete one of their plants this year, and they've started on the second one. So the local municipality took a lot of the recommendations seriously, which was good.
That's great.
No, I didn't realize it was so much in the wastewater and the sewer plants. I just had kind of assumed they were getting it out of there, and it was more just from the yards and the septics. But that's interesting. I didn't realize that. So that's a good place to start for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it can be 75 to 90%. The total nitrogen in wastewater can be 75 to 90% in the form of nitrate. So it's essentially nitrate going out. Yeah, it's stunning. And I think the thought process at the time was that's good for landscaping. We're giving it nutrients. So, but it's too much. And so, in this part of Florida, there's been a law in place for a long time that if wastewater plants want to discharge into a waterway or into the bay even, they have to meet this advanced wastewater treatment to get the nitrogen and phosphorus levels down, and then they can get a permit to do it. And I think they recently passed, there was legislation requiring that over in the Indian River Lagoon, that wastewater plants they have to be AWT, this advanced wastewater treatment, if they're going to discharge into the waterways in Indian River Lagoon.
Okay. Interesting. So you feel that it's more along the lines of the wastewater treatment and suburban type influences more than just ag runoff or yard runoff, or is it like 50-50, or is it kind of a mix?
Yeah, it's a mix. It's just that there's been so much land conversion to residential development. So, people like to point the finger at agriculture, and but that's what I'm saying. When you look out on the landscape in Southwest Florida, Manatee, Sarasota County, there's not a lot of ag left, particularly in Sarasota County, but there's a lot of green space that's getting irrigated and fertilized. I worked with, I still do. I work with a large development called Lakewood Ranch, and they established a irrigation utility, a non-potable irrigation utility. It was a large farm. It's about 50 square miles, if I remember right. I think that's about right. And it has been converting from agriculture to residential development. It's probably 90% converted, maybe even close to 100. But they had a lot of wells. That's how they irrigated most of the farm. But over time, we've transitioned to reclaimed water that's AWT and surface water. They have a lot of large lakes that were dug for borrow material that we also use for irrigation. In this particular area, groundwater, overpumping of groundwater is a concern, and upconing and having brackish high TDS water that's not good, will kill landscape. So the water management district here has co-invested in a lot of pipelines and infrastructure in order for Lakewood Ranch's utility called Braden River Utilities to convert from groundwater to surface water and reclaim water for irrigation. But as a result, and that's where we've done some passive nutrient reduction projects to help even further reduce nutrients. Actually, we get reclaimed water from 4 utilities come into this huge area: City of Bradenton, City of Sarasota, Manatee County, and we just negotiated a contract with Sarasota County that they went AWT. Manatee County is the only one that's not AWT, and we actually developed a project in the field where we filter the water through basically wood chips, a woody material, carbon, and something called biochar to reduce nitrogen and phosphorus before it goes into the storage lake and gets pumped out for irrigation. So that's been a very innovative group, and like I said, they provide now irrigation. So nobody can put in wells, nobody can use potable water for irrigation there. It all has to come through their non-potable irrigation utility, and it's a mixture of mainly surface and reclaimed water and some groundwater we still have access to when it gets, in the dry season where we need to use some of the wells again.
Interesting.
Do you reuse that biochar and I mean, I know something's done with it. Does it go out? Is it composted, or does it go out to farm so it can be used as a nutrient in a better situation, or what's done with the byproduct?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So what we found was we let the Lakewood Ranch or Braden River Utilities, they probably upfronted about 2 years of research that they let me do out in the field before we built the system. And the system's about 2.5 acres, and it's 4 cells that have this media in it. That system, when we did build it, was co-funded by the Water Management District because they were very interested in this type of technology too, which is just we're using organic waste to clean water. So what we saw was, and so we did this pilot project. It's still running. We test it every month, and it's been in place since 2020, I think, right at the end of the pandemic. And we're continually seeing really high removal of nitrate because again, this water is high in nitrate because it's not AWT. So here's the thing: what we found was, and we have 4 cells, and one of them has just simply sawdust in it. So one has just kind of a mulch. The other 2 have these kind of high-end wood chips that are recommended, and we're pretty much seeing every one of them is getting as close to 95 to 99% removal of nitrate. Okay. It's basically what's happening is that woody material is submerged. So we have a drip irrigation system with the reclaimed water drips into it. There is a baffle so that wood chip is about 17, 18 inches deep. It has to fill with water, and then it slowly bleeds over this baffle, but it stays submerged the entire time. So it's anaerobic. So if you have carbon in an anaerobic environment, and nitrate coming in, you will attract bacteria that denitrifies, basically strips off the oxygen and puts the dinitrogen back in the atmosphere, completes the nitrogen cycle. That's what that advanced wastewater treatment does, by the way, is it just finishes the nitrogen cycle. Otherwise, just treating water to nitrate, you're not completing the nitrogen cycle. So 78% of the air I breathe is nitrogen.
Yeah.
Right. So basically being able to complete the nitrogen. Fertilizer, of course, is based upon extracting nitrogen from the atmosphere and making synthetic fertilizer. So I make the analogy that we've been mining carbon from the earth and putting it in the air. In the case of nitrogen, we've been mining it from the air and putting it in the earth and water. And that's why we have so much overloading of nitrogen in our environment, in our soils, in our water on the planet. So it's kind of the opposite of carbon mining. But anyway, it closes the nitrogen cycle. So that's been real effective. And what we're seeing, and there's been other research on this, that system, that carbon, because it's submerged, it doesn't decompose rapidly. It's not exposed to oxygen. And it'll last. We think it'll last for 20 to 50 years before they have to replace it. So that's incredible. Okay. We also took core samples. I had core samples taken in each cell, and we had the DNA sequence to see what kind of bacteria was in there. And sure enough, the alpha species, I think the top 3 or 4 species were denitrification bacteria. We also had something called an anammox bacteria that can actually denitrify ammonia, nitrogen, if it comes in. It basically combines nitrite with the ammonium and converts it to dinitrogen and water. The biochar is a bit different. The biochar was, I was really enamored, like a lot of people get enamored with biochar. I'm not so enamored anymore. It's pretty sexy, I guess, but because they found it in the Amazon and been there for thousands of years, and it helped grow food, giving them this incredible organic layer out there that they can grow food. And they figured they were burning their waste somehow in these trenches and converting it to charcoal instead of ash. And it was the side benefit was it created a lot of good carbon in the soil. And it's basically, when you look at it under a microscope, it's like, I call it, I've heard it called like a soil reef, coral reef. Yeah, all of these at a micro scale, water and microbes can get into it. It's the surface area, the nooks and crannies, if you will, just incredible. And so I remember going to the National Biochar Conference in 2018 when I was doing the research, and telling some of the producers that were there what I was trying to do on water quality. Most of them produce biochar. The main interest in it is a soil amendment. But I said, if you send me samples of your material, I've got a way to test it for nitrogen and phosphorus reduction. So we were getting biochar from all over the country and testing it out at Lakewood Ranch. For the most part, the one common denominator was pretty much any biochar will store a lot of water. It just, in all those nooks and crannies, so it's a good kind of drought resistant amendment, probably, because it'll hold a lot of water for a long time in all those nooks and crannies. But we didn't really, for the most part, see that it was very effective for removing nitrogen. On the other hand, what we found was, mainly from research at the University of Florida, because I looked at all the universities, by the way, exponentially are looking at biochar, what I saw, in the last 10, 20 years. And the University of Florida, it turned out, was probably the leading researcher in the world for looking at it for removing nutrients from wastewater. So that's exactly what we were trying to do. So I ended up engaging with Dr. David Mazik up there at the time, who was kind of the lead researcher. And it turns out he was a carbon expert. He's an engineer. He sat on the American Water Works Association for setting carbon standards for treating water. We've used carbon actually for decades to purify drinkable water, right? Carbon filters. So he had developed a biochar pellet he had a couple of facilities up in Gainesville to clean air emissions under the Clean Air Act. So there's, we've had a cap and trade. I didn't know this till I got into the research for the playbook, but we've had a cap and trade program for over 20 years for meeting the clean air standards, where the industry, pays into or installs technologies to reduce things like sulfur and nitrous oxide from their emissions. This all came out of the acid rain stuff in the 70s and 80s. So that was an outcome. And it's been challenged, I've noticed, several times in court, but it's always gone through and it's been effective. The national government has these incredible graphics that they produce every year on the release of these pollutants into the atmosphere. And what you can see over the past 20 years, it has shrunken dramatically to now where it's the sulfur and nitrous oxide, I guess in particular, is centered around urban areas very tightly. and some of the agricultural areas, because ag up mainly in the Midwest is not regulated. So I think they're getting a lot of volatilization of some of these, like ammonia, nitrogen gassing off. But anyway, he had the technology already and the means to produce these in his facility, and we adapted it to water pellets. So what we found was, Brad, that sugar beet tailings, the waste from sugar after they get the sugar squeeze it, would automatically form calcium deposits on the biochar, on the char. And those calcium deposits are not calcium, I'm sorry, magnesium oxide. I'm thinking like calcium deposits, but it was magnesium oxide forms from these sugar beet tailings. And that's a mineral that's how you get rid of phosphorus. You can't gas it off into the atmosphere. You have to attach it to the mineral, right? And it would bind to this magnesium oxide. And that was from research they had already done. The problem is we don't grow sugar beets in
that's up north
United States. So what we did was we just figured, well, why don't we just take magnesium oxide and use it as a binder with any organic material? So I think we use primarily southern yellow pine because it is a common waste feedstock here. And it worked. We bound it, and it actually helped with the binding process, and it helped remove the phosphorus. So we have a patent on it, but it's basically you from that exercise we could produce this biochar with magnesium oxide on any feedstock to bind phosphorus. What we found on the downside was the absorption capacity for this wastewater was 2 or 3 months. And so the next question was, I talked to a local landscape distributor here about taking the waste product, and he could sell it as a solar. And he was fascinated with biochar, and so he was interested in doing that. And then if we could get enough money for the waste, we could just use that then to keep replacing it with new material. But that part of it, we haven't finished closing the cycle on yet. But that's the only way I think that would work for this, because the biochar is not cheap to make. It's not a cheap product. And if you have to replace it every 2 or 3 months, that gets to be quite a bit. So we haven't done that. The phosphorus is typically not a problem in this wastewater. It's a nitrate, and phosphorus is not the nutrient in our estuaries. It's nitrogen. So we haven't had really motivation to pursue that further, but it would need to be. You're right. So what you're saying is interesting. That's exactly what would need to happen. There would need to be a closed circle model in order for that to be cost effective, because the absorption capacity we found was not very good. 2 or 3 months. I originally, from some of the research, it looked like it could be several years, but we didn't find that.
No, that's very, very interesting. Oh,
but it would be a good byproduct, because it's got all this phosphorus bound up to it, right? And I don't think it can be released unless you've got microbes in the soil that are going to mine it.
So it's not something you would put in a compost if a grower was needing available phosphorus to.
You could, as long as they had microbes in the soil that could get. Yeah, it would. Yeah, I think it would be good for that if you had the microbes that can get to it, because so the thing with biochar is you have to inoculate it right before you use it. If you don't, then it's going to steal and absorb nutrients for probably a couple of years. Right. So you want to get the nutrients and the microorganisms inoculated in. When I was doing a lot of the testing, one of the things I did was mix the biochar with lake algae, because this lake algae is full of stuff, right? It's full of nutrients. It's full of these microorganisms that are in the water. And I noticed immediately when I mixed it in, the odor went away. People use carbon in their refrigerator to reduce odor. So the algae had no smell, and I'd let it sit for a couple weeks just to get all inoculated, and then I'd use that around my trees, and they would start blooming within days.
Yeah.
With that, so yeah, I think biochar is great, but it's quite it's not real easy and cheap to produce it. Okay, and then to inoculate it. So there's a whole process. And what I realized after studying soil through the Dr. Elaine Ingram's coursework is if you make good compost, that's probably a better product anyway, and it's probably not as expensive as the biochar. That was kind of my conclusion. So I've become, you could use biochar in making your compost as one of the carbon sources, and I have at times. But if you make good compost, you're probably just as good, if not better off, than trying to get biochar to work.
Interesting. So other than the cost, what are some of the other barriers that are kind of blocking or making this implementation of transitioning from a chemical treatment to a biological treatment in the governments or in the ecology in general? What other barriers are there besides the cost? Are there other ones?
Well, in my opinion, I did a guest lecture in a biology class here at the local university a couple years ago on this, and brought some of this compost in that had all the microbes in it, and went through it with the students, and what to look for, and they were going crazy. Oh, I'm finding a nematode. I see you back. And afterwards, they said, because they were interested, young people are interested in this stuff. They're interested in regenerative agriculture and all these, natural foods and farming and all that. And they said, there's no place in the university that teaches this stuff. They teach us about how to use chemicals most efficiently. And so, I think that the whole education system has been infiltrated by, I don't mean to be, I just think that IFAS and big chemical companies have got a lot of money in financing research at the universities and IFAS, and it's all about how to apply the chemicals most efficiently. And the people know there's really good people at IFAS that I think understand this, but the biology and organic farming, but that's not what the focus is on. And it's too bad, because what I saw is students are really interested in this. And what I wanted to do, Brad, you'll appreciate this, is train an army of people to use a microscope.
Yeah.
Because I think there's going to be a demand on that in the future, to make sure that soil and this compost have the minimum diversity and density of biology that you need to cycle nutrients and minerals.
Yeah.
So that, and Brad could probably speak to this better than I can, but I think that's probably what's happened with the citrus industry, is they've been so dependent on IFAS telling them the magic potion of the day. And it may be a quick fix, but it doesn't last.
Yeah.
And this approach, if you can get the ecosystem built up in the soil, it'll self-sustain, as long as you don't do anything to apply chemicals and whatnot and herbicides to kill it. And so when the conventional agricultural chemical people say that they want to feed the world, and I think organic will feed the world for the rest of humanity. That's the difference. And I've seen this. So my younger brother has a documentary that was released last year called Organic Rising that did a deep dive in this. He interviewed scientists all over the country. He's a Pulitzer Prize winner, photographer. He moved to Europe around the time I moved to Florida in the 1980s. He moved back here in 2000s, and he said, Steve, the food here is awful. It's not like when we were kids.
Right.
and I didn't notice because I lived here my whole life. He said, and in Europe, they banned all these chemicals. The food over there is, he says, I just can't get over how the food system here has declined. So he went on this obsessive mission of trying to understand what happened to our food system, and ended up interviewing scientists and organic farmers all over the country. I introduced him to some of my clients down here, like Lady Moon Farm, which is the largest organic farm probably east of the Mississippi, and they're down in Punta Gorda, Florida. But they also have, farms up in Pennsylvania and Georgia. They move up there in the summer and they'll move back down here in the fall. So their growing season is all year long. But so Florida's pretty represented in the movie, but it was a real eye-opening with these scientists and seeing what's happening with our food system over the years.
And it's happened so slowly, some people, don't notice. Kids, young kids have never had a good tomato. We remember, but it transitioned so slowly to the quality that we didn't notice.
And whenever I go out to Lady Moon Farms, that's one of the favorite things to do is go out and pick tomatoes and eat them because they're like candy.
Yeah.
No,
I got to go out to the Midwest to get a good tomato when I'm out traveling and so in somebody's home garden, and it's unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, if you ever get down to they keep a pretty low profile down there, but we worked on a lot of their water. Their farm, so they got probably 2,000 to 3,000 acres in production. It's all vegetables, and they'll have 30, 35 different vegetables.
Wow.
In production at one time. They have their own cold storage packing facility. They're about 150 people that they move their whole crew up and down to the farms when they relocate. But it's beautiful farm. My brother, when he was doing his film, he said that other farmers in California, they knew about Lady Moon, but this guy's kind of a recluse, the owner, Tom Bedard. And they said they don't understand how he can do it at the scale he's doing it, but he does. It's just gorgeous. And he intentionally, they'll plant the red and green lettuce in alternate rows. It looks gorgeous. And the food is just amazing. So you'll see it in Whole Foods and Publix, but it's coming from that region. But the water quality down there, the groundwater quality is pretty mineralized. And so the property that he bought initially, the initial 640 acres, the groundwater was not going to sustain the farm. So we did some prospecting of the groundwater, and we found that there was an area kind of in the low part of the property where it drained to naturally anyway that had a shell unit. And we dug a little 3-acre pond there, and it just recharges like crazy with the shell. So he basically is mixing that fresh water with the well water and sustaining the farm that way for irrigation. But he lucked out with the shell unit.
Location, right?
Yeah.
Good for him though. And it makes good food.
Yeah. And Chris had asked the question about, organics and regenerative, and I have these conversations all the time. So is this large farm, is it a certified organic farm, or is it just using good regenerative practices?
It's long been certified organic. Tom Bedard, Lady Moon Farms have been around since I think he started in Pennsylvania in the 1970s, maybe. He got his big start with the Alar scare. Remember on the apples that back in so there was a 60 Minutes episode, and he said before that nobody would talk to him about his organic food, but the next day the big distributorship up there said, "I will buy all your produce." And he never looked back. The farm just has grown continually since then. And it's certified organic. And so this whole thing about organic versus regenerative, I try to look at it from the consumer standpoint. And that's kind of what my brother's film is actually looking at too, is understanding this organic stuff, because it's confusing to the consumer.
Sure.
And I think one of the things that made it even more confusing is several years ago, I think against the recommendations of the certification board, the USDA allowed hydroponic grown food to be certified organic. Okay. And you can debate that, but
Right.
the concern was it's not grown in soil, and having fertile soil is a keystone of the organic program. Okay.
Right.
So there's a whole group that kind of broke off from that called the Real Organic Project that are organic farmers that are committed to growing food in soil, in healthy soil. And Tom Bedard, Lady Moon Farms, is one of them. And so from the consumer standpoint, I think it's really important. The organic program has its faults. It's not perfect, but it is an established program. There
Right.
is no equivalent in regenerative. There's no oversight, no certification that says you're doing this, therefore the consumer can be assured. Anybody can claim that they're regenerative agriculture, but the consumer doesn't know. For the consumer, the only thing that you have to go by to have some assurance is that USDA organic certification. Okay.
Yeah.
And what's happened is the Rodell Institute, which is like the premier, they've been researching organic for, since the 1950s. They have developed a regenerative organic certification. The Real Organic Project that is adamant about there should be at least a differential between food grown in soil and not grown in soil, whether it's organic or not. They have certifications programs too, but it's an add-on to the USDA. Okay. So the USDA organic certification is the base that if it had it, and there's stuff on, how the food is grown socially, justice and all that.
Yeah.
So there's probably 3 or 4 add-on certifications to the USDA organic, but that's the base. And the concern that I've seen is in California. So the regenerative farming is great. The principles sound great, but what's happening is some of the large chemical companies, Monsanto and Cargill, they're getting into, some application of glyphosate is okay, because they can't play in the organic market. It doesn't allow chemicals. So this is another avenue for them to get in and say, we're being sustainable. And so California last year started hearings about developing a certification program for regenerative. And most of the testimony was, why are you recreating the wheel? You already have a certification program for organic. Why would you even need to do this? Well, that's why, because these chemical companies, I think, want to get into the action. So at the end of the day, it was such a mess. I think the only thing they did was come up with some nebulous definition of what regenerative agriculture is in California.
Right.
So it's become kind of a red herring diversion from the program that already exists. And if there's faults with the program, and there are, fix it, because the organic program is not a federal program. It's not part of the USDA. It's approved by the USDA, but it's an independent panel, a board that's open to the public. They have public meetings. Anybody can go and give testimony and make recommendations to the organic certification board in the country.
Yeah.
It's confusing to the consumer, and that's the message that I try to get out, is that the consumer, all you have is a USDA certification now. Improve it if need be.
Yeah. Yeah, and we had Dan Kittredge on. I don't know if you know Dan from the Bionutrient Food Association. He's the one that's been working on the technology for the meters where you can go into a grocery store. Yeah. And then once a consumer,
well, that's a game changer, isn't it?
Then all this doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
Everybody's got to grow the perfect carrot, and the only way they can do that is through biology, carbon with the chemistry.
Yeah. Has he been on a previous podcast?
Yes. Yeah, you can. I'll send it.
I need to go back and hear, because that would be amazing.
Yeah, because regenerative, there's no rules, and in certified organics, there's things they can and can't do that there's some things they should be able to use that they can't, and they can use a lot of copper, which causes problems, as fungicides. So but that's neither here nor there. But regenerative, I think has to be, how do you measure what the farmer's doing? Are you measuring carbon? Or I think you should be measuring life in the soil to determine whether you are a good grower or not. And I imagine you agree with that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with
background.
That. The metabolics of the soil, how much is going on in it. Yeah.
For sure.
So Steve, are you saying that maybe instead of trying to split, things between regenerative and organic, maybe enhance or correct some of the organic, criteria or ratings and add some of this regenerative practice in there to make it a better standard? Would that be in your opinion,
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, why recreate the wheel?
Right.
It'd be easier to just fix things. And I think that for the most part, organic believes in the same things as regenerative. I mean, I talk to organic farmers. They'll till some, but they do it minimally, and they say, the biology, if you get the biology built up, doing minor tilling, it recovers really quickly. And I think there's been research on that. So I mean, there's some difference between them, but the outcome is
it does.
The outcomes are the same. So
they're both driving to the same end.
Yeah.
Why not join them and make something really good?
Yeah. Unless there's something else in play that sees an advantage to their market to promote regenerative, because that would allow the use, limited use, targeted use of some of the herbicides and whatnot.
Yeah. No, and that's in my world. Minimizing biological disturbances goes as far as almost anything. When you were at the conference and we talk about it, it's not just one thing, but just getting a guy to stop herbicide or change a herbicide sometimes makes all the difference in the world. And he's still doing the same fertility and not even adding much extra carbon. So it's amazing how quick things can change.
Yeah.
Even though soil building is a long process, but just
exactly. Well, I mean, the organic transition is typically 3 years, which is what do you do over 3 years to get certified? But so what I've been working on most recently is through relationships I have with a lot of large communities here, and given how much, that's one thing I've noticed is the amount of outdoor water use for residential irrigation will blow your mind, right? I've seen it. It's not unusual for it to be 3 to 4 times that they use indoor to maintain their and it's so I think a lot of these residential communities are probably using more fertilizer and more water than it ever did as in its former life as agriculture.
100%.
And so
we've talked about it on here before. A farmer only wants to use the least amount of fertilizer he can because he's got to make money. Where, a yard, some people don't care what it costs to have a deep green weed-free yard. So, and
they're growing a crop you can't even eat. So, so what I've been looking at most recently is using some of the biologically rich or biocomplete, as they call it, compost that's got the minimum density and diversity of microbes in it. To make an extract, and using that in some of these residential communities, because there's a huge potential market there. Agriculture is kind of a tough market because of IFAS and whatnot, and I'm sure you could tell all the stories on that. But what's really interesting, I've worked with a lot of these master plan communities and homeowners associations on water management of their ponds and whatnot for decades, and I've started to transition into, if you really want to reduce algae in your lakes, reduce the amount of nutrients that are seeping into it from fertilizer and reclaimed water. And to do that, you need to redo your landscape. You need to transition from chemicals to biology.
Sure.
And I'm working with several right now. I have 3 big ones. I won't name them. One in Manatee, one in Sarasota, and one in Charlotte. And the one down in Charlotte, homeowners have been doing this and for about a year or so. and the pictures are incredible. Side by side lot, you can write down the lot line, one lot with chemicals, one with biology.
Yeah.
And not only are you not applying chemicals, it looks much better.
Yeah.
And so what typically do is we usually apply, if needed, some carbon, cheaper compost just to get carbon into the soil, and then apply the biology to it. Pretty hefty initially, like weekly for 4 weeks. It takes a little bit it takes probably what I've seen 3 or 4 applications to really start seeing the system, the biology in the system with the microscope. Kind of like I think our friend Alan Skinner makes an analogy. It's like pulling a lawnmower. Sometimes you got to pull the cord 2 or 3 times before you start running. But once you get them established, then we'll follow up with applications. But it typically, and I'm working with one large master plan community now where we're talking about a 3-year contract to do about a couple hundred acres, and so they gave me their budget for chemicals, and it's going to be cost effective.
Oh, sure.
Comparison, and actually, it's going to be cheaper in the 2nd and 3rd years.
Yep.
I'm sure we're going to have to do some target weed control at times, but it's mainly turf and ornamentals is what we're dealing with. The point is these communities have money. They have mandatory dues. They collect money. They're going to spend money on managing their landscape, and they're always looking for a way to do it cheaper and better. And most of them don't even realize that there's an alternative to chemicals. That's the first revelation. Yeah. Because once they find that out, what I've seen is the wheels start going, and they'll start thinking, we got to try that. And so what I've typically done are pilot projects in these communities, just so they could see on a limited scale what the difference is. And it's always played out pretty well, where they can pick contrast with chemicals and biology side by side, and they can see how much more. But what's surprising to me in these residential landscapes, what I've seen, especially the ornamental areas, is how much the fertilizer pellets that they put in with these plants, and then they put in the slow release, are ubiquitous. You just scrape the mulch aside, it's just full of this stuff. And so that's kind of scary because and so there was one, it was really interesting. It was a pilot project, and it didn't come out so good for the ornamentals. And I told them, I said, you've got all this, I noticed just all this slow release fertilizer. My hypothesis is that the roots, the plants don't need to spend much energy putting out dates because they've got access to all this synthetic fertilizer. So I said, let's try it again, and I'm going to remove all those. I'm going to go in and we're going to rake them out and remove them, and we'll apply again. And we did, and it worked.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense.
Absolutely, common sense.
It's going to take the easy way if it's there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Why spend energy if I don't need to?
Right.
Yeah. So I think that's a real potential and unlimited market is the residential
No, I do it here. My yard's a biological yard, and I've got some sod people that are wanting to go down that road with, so that's coming. There's a few people doing it. Dane, who you met at the conference, he did that for years. He had a composting machine on a 1-ton truck, and he did yards and high school football fields, and so
cool. Yeah,
and people want it. People are asking for it.
And that's what we're podcasting about, right? And Steve, you hit it right on the head. People don't know about it, right? It's easy to just hire True Green to come and blast your yard every week or 2 weeks with chemical, and people don't realize that you can make a difference, make it better, help pollution, and probably save a little bit of money.
They will live with some weeds, and it looks better. From what I've seen down in the Charlotte County area, it looks a lot better. It's greener. The plants look more robust. The ornamentals are more colorful, and they just look healthier.
Yeah.
So I mean, So yeah, I'd like to talk to you more about that offline, Brad, because we're working through the logistics now of how to do that, and we've kind of in this area that has 200 acres. We've identified potential staging areas where we have access to water that we can just act to make the extract, and I think we have some really good extract machines that can do it, because that's the beauty. If you have compost, if you're starting with compost, it's really rich in the microbes.
Right.
You don't need to brew it that long.
Right.
You may add some food, but you don't need to spend a couple days
right
brewing it. You can produce it in probably about an hour and then get it out.
Yeah. You got to have the right biology in the compost. I mean,
yeah,
you're not making biology, you're just splitting and replicating it.
So fortunately, over in this area, I have access to two good compost producers now. One is I know we met on a site a couple years ago, but there's a gal over here, Karen Dakin, who was there's a Dakin dairy. She divested from the dairy, and she's about our age, and she said, she took the Soil Food Web, and she brought in the gurus on compost from California. I can't remember their names offhand. Casey and Keisha, I think Wheeler. She paid them to drive across the country with their windrow turner in tow, and she put them up for a couple months, and they made some awesome compost. I think she had about 6 windrows, about 200 feet. So she's got a good supply of good compost. And she said, I've decided I'm going to dedicate my 4th quarter to making good soil and compost. And she's been working she's been trying to work with agriculture because that's her background, but it hasn't, I think it's been challenging.
Yeah.
So I got with her on this residential thing as an alternative, and she's helping with that.
That's cool.
And there's another good compost provider, not quite at scale, but hers is a commercial licensed organic operation. So and she's got plenty of it. So that's hopefully not the limiting factor. His source material is good. Yeah.
Well, Steve, we're running short of time. You've given us an amazing amount of info here. Like I told Brad, you could do a lecture on just this video. It was awesome. So last chance to put out, one last piece of advice, or what do you want the listeners to remember, or future hydrologists? What kind of advice would you give, or what do you want the audience to see or hear? Take your time, come out with whatever you want to leave the podcast with.
Yeah, I think the biggest revelation for me over the last couple of years is understanding this link between water and soil. And one of the things that did it was the visual of, I think we all know of the land succession of going from bare earth to old growth forest, and what happens on the landscape over time, and how fire and flood can move it back and forth, but it's always moving towards that end game of old growth forest. The revelation is that there's something going on under the ground that's just as interesting. The soil is going from bacteria dominated to fungal dominated. The soil is going, therefore, from a higher pH to a lower pH. It's going from nitrate as the form of nitrogen of preference to ammonium. And so the whole cycle of things, not just above ground but below ground, I find just incredibly fascinating. And when I look at all the development that's going on in the state of Florida, they're digging these lakes, right? And they're using that fill that has nothing in it, just sand, benign material, and they're compacting it, filling to build the homes and the streets. They're compacting that, and they're creating the ideal environment for nitrate to exist in. So so there's probably this third form of nitrate. It's not just fertilizer and waste products. It's the environment that we're creating with this land development form that's conducive to nitrate. So it's no wonder we're having algae problems in lakes and waterways. So getting back to this transition, just like farming does, you can do this on your lot, transition from conventional to organic over time. And like I think Brad has noticed too, at that scale, it can happen pretty quickly.
Right.
Nice.
No, definitely. Very interesting.
So people can do this on their own.
Yes.
Sure. It's the information they need, right? It's the education they need,
Yep.
and they need to hear it. So that's what us, three of us trying our best, get the word out, and others as well. So
good dose of it today. This was great. We're going to have to do this again.
Yeah.
Yep. That is awesome. So, okay. I'll do the ending here. Thank you, Steve. We really appreciate your insights. Great information out there. Thanks for joining us. That's about all the time we have for this podcast. I thank everyone for watching out there, and have a great day.
Take care, Steve.
You too.
Thanks, Steve.